Thanks for coming out today, everybody. My name is Oak Norton with Scripture Notes, and this is Patricia Kent, our guest today. I met Patricia at a conference several months ago, and our booths were actually right next to each other. I was there for Scripture Notes, and she was there for her Anasazi experience, and she was going to be speaking on these petroglyphs in southern Utah. And so I got to talk to her several times over the course of the conference and really enjoyed that and learned some fascinating things. And I thought I need to have her on as a speaker. I know other people would be interested in this stuff as well. And Patricia, you may need to remind me exactly when you got started with this. Maybe that's part of your presentation you can cover, but I do know from your brief biography that you've worked with as a ranger in national parks and been on Forest Service archaeological digs and stuff like that. And I know you've been doing this for a long time, but if you want to touch on a little bit of are you going to touch on your past history and how you got into this as you start your presentation?
I hadn't, but I can.
Oh, yeah. Why don't you just share it? I'm not sure. I know for the last decade, you've been going up into the hills there and studying the petroglyphs around St. George. And why don't you just briefly share a little about how you got started with this?
Well, I guess it started when I was a little kid up on our ranch in southeast Idaho. And as my dad would plow, he would turn up arrowheads and Indian artifacts. And we'd wander through the fields and pick up arrowheads. And it was interesting because obsidian is very prominent in that area. So growing up, I had never seen an arrowhead that was made out of anything but obsidian. And I learned many years after that they made them out of many, many different materials. My mother joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because of the Indian people and her interest in them. And I think that just carried over with me because I have always loved them. When I was 8 years old, our family went to Mesa Verde, and I made the statement then, someday I'm going to work here. And after my mission, I had the opportunity for 5 years to be an interpretive ranger at Mesa Verde and learn about the Anasazi people and their culture and their way of life. So it just seems like my path in life has taken me to Native American cultures. And when I came to St. George, it was no different. I found out that you can pick up a rock and throw it in any direction here and just about hit a petroglyph. They're everywhere. And I had been to this area in Land Hill many times, but really I didn't know the meaning. I'd never really studied the meaning of petroglyphs. And about 10 years ago, I met a man by the name of Paul Taylor. And he's the one that started telling me what was on these rocks. And when he began to speak, the Spirit also spoke and said, the information that he is telling you is true. And you need to learn everything you can about this information. At the time, that didn't make sense to me because Paul already knew it and he was doing his thing. But what I didn't know was that Paul has cancerous brain tumors and they continue to get worse. And so at this point, he's not able to get out and share these things. But the Lord has blessed me to be able to carry that on and to teach people what is on these rocks.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. And why don't you go ahead and just jump right into your presentation? I know that's why people showed up today, and there's a number more that signed up that always do because they want to get the replay later. So go ahead and share your screen.
Okay.
Perfect.
Is that up?
Yep, you got it.
So,
And if anybody has questions as we go, just toss them into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll, if it's relevant right at that moment, I'll ask Patricia, but otherwise we can wait till the end and you can take some questions.
great. So the title of my presentation is Anasazi Ridge Petroglyphs, Testify of Jesus Christ. Most of the time when we think of petroglyphs and we look at petroglyphs, we don't think of Jesus Christ. But on the screen, you see 3 specific petroglyphs that are at Anasazi Valley. And each one of these represent Jesus Christ. And as we go through this, you will come to an understanding of how that can actually be. So Anasazi Ridge is, if you go to Santa Clara, Utah, and drive on Old Highway 91, about 2.5 miles, you will come to an area that says Santa Clara River Reserve and Anasazi Valley. There's a parking lot there, and from there you can hike up the trail to the petroglyphs. So this is Anasazi Ridge at Land Hill, and this is the area that we're going to talk about. But between this area and Santa Clara, going along the Santa Clara River, there are over 600 panels of petroglyphs that we have taken pictures of. There are probably more than that, but Paul is old and not well, and when we were first starting to do this, I was crippled and couldn't walk well, so it's a fun place to explore. I'm going to start out by helping you understand how we interpret and how we date, and then I'll go into showing you what is there. On this sandstone is what is known as desert varnish or patina, and desert varnish is basically made up of iron oxide and manganese and clay. And over time, that puts a black or brown, you can see, can you see my mouse on this?
Yeah.
So you can see over here it's brown, and yet this is quite heavily black. And this was the best material for the native people to carve into and make sure that people could see what was there. The material in this is actually a living organism, and it's got microscopic bacteria in it, and it's living. Well, anything that is living can be dated, and so we take a sample of that patina and we date that, and then we take samples of petroglyphs, and this is the oldest petroglyph along the Santa Clara River, and it has been dated at 600 BC. That's pretty old. So you can see at one time the petroglyph was clear and clean, but it's filled in because patina is a living organism. It continues to grow and it will fill back in. And that's what it has done here. Here's one that dates 350 to 400 AD, and you can see it's clear and crisp, and very little patina is growing back in it. This shows you a really good example of how we date. Notice the coloration of the little man, and this part of the flower is darker than this. Someone carved the little man and this about the same time. And approximately 100 years later, someone came along and said, oh, he should be holding a flower. And so they added the stems and the top part, and it's much lighter. So that gives you an idea of how petroglyphs are dated.
So basically, just to kind of summarize that, So you date them based on the amount of patina that's grown back into those areas.
Correct.
Okay.
So what we need to remember is these are not pictures. These are words. This is for the native people, like them writing a book, but only using symbols and pictures. And that's what they've done. We have to be able to interpret that in some way. And in order to do that, we use their universal language, which is the trade language or native sign language. When the colonists first came to this continent, they learned that every group of Indians had their own language, and it was impossible for them to learn it all and be able to communicate. And so they found out that if they learned the trade language, they could communicate with any tribe. And that trade language was their trade language. Every native tribe, from the tip of South America to the top of Canada, all of them use the basic same sign language to communicate with each other. And so we have used those symbols. If you can sign it with your hands, you can write it on the rocks. So I want to share with you some examples of these symbols. Over here, we have the symbol. If I go like this and come across, I'm saying there's balance. This is crossover. If I take my hands and come across like this, it's come together. Here we have two, they look like J's, one from each side. That's come together, but from two different directions. This one's coming from the left, this one's coming from the right. If I go straight across and 3 lines down, that is actually the word choice. And then we have a complete sentence down here. We have come to place of first water, a cup with a 1 in it. We go back. So they would combine symbols together to make a sentence. This is a symbol. If I take my hand and go straight out like this, I am saying I'm going to make a proclamation or a statement. If you're going to write that on the rocks, how do you do that? We have a messenger. We have a time coil. We have, my screen's being blocked partly. I hope yours isn't. We have, it looks like ears on these people. Actually, if I go like this with my hands up to my ears, what I am saying in sign language is I am listening. Okay. Then we have, they had their own solstices or constellations, excuse me, and they put them on the rocks based on what was going on during the solstice. So these 3 stars here represent the winter solstice. These 3 represent the summer, and these 4 represent the equinox. So if you know what their symbols are and you know their culture, it's fairly easy to interpret. All things that are square to Native Americans have a definite name. If it has a definite name, you should be able to figure that out. So we find here sheep that are square. We have a river that is square, and we have people that are square. This is a symbol for a sacrifice tree or a grandfather tree. Oftentimes you'll find digits. Those often relate to dates or time. And at the bottom here, we have a closed cave and an open cave. So in identifying people and how they looked at people, anyone who had no feet was a spirit. And the creator figure was always depicted as a spirit. So you notice he has no feet. He has the buffalo horns and water between the horns. Notice the statement symbol coming from the top of his horns. Also, the natives believe, many of them, that he cut off one of his fingers, shook the blood, and created mankind. So how do you write that in a book with pictures? You give him 4 fingers on one hand and 5 on the other. We have a water shaman. This individual we know is connected to the river, so he would be in charge of your water situations. Here we have sheep. Again, large groups of sheep represent people. This is a group that obviously has a specific name according to the people on this area. So we should be able to figure out who that is. This is the Christ figure. He has, on all 3, you'll notice he has a wounded foot. He has a Kachina life belt. These 2 are across his chest. This one, on the other hand, is open. It's interesting because Kachinas are spirits, and spirits don't have feet. So he really shouldn't have a Kachina life belt on. But we know that the Kachina life belt represents power over life and death. Who then, if you think about it, the only person that I know that's ever lived on the earth who was mortal, yet had power over life and death, was Jesus Christ. So it's not hard then to see that they have represented him in this. Some people say, well, why didn't they depict him the same way each time? It depends on what they are trying to teach, and each one of these Christ figures is on a different panel. We also see on the bottom down here, this Christ figure has a death mask on, and he has water coming in, which we know Christ is the living water. So as we go through this, it will become more apparent why they pecked them out the way that they did. They also had maps up on the hill. This is a map. If you stand right facing this map, just like this, and look out over the valley, you will see these objects, most of them. This one you won't see because it's down in a canyon, but these 2 circles denote 2 pools of water out in the desert. They don't, if you'll notice, connect like the river continues on. These are just 2 separate pools. 4 years ago, when we hiked out into that area, we came to an area where water was literally coming up out of the ground and had formed pools, but it wasn't running. It ran maybe 50 yards and then went back down into the earth. The maps that they drew were to indicate where to hunt or where ceremonies were, where they would find food. They had many purposes for maps, just like we do. This area up here is a large mesa over to the northwest of the valley, and it basically tells us that there is a ceremonial site up there, probably where the young men went to have their vision quests and become men. It's interesting also that on the rocks, as I mentioned, they have their own constellations. You'll see the constellation here and here. If you go up there in the evening or in the early morning, before the sun rises, you will, whatever either solstice or equinox it is, you will find those same star patterns in the sky. So this one is the summer solstice in June. If you're up on that hill at 4 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts, and you look up, you're going to see definitely these 3 stars. And you say, well, how do you know those 3 versus any of the others? Here's the pattern of stars. There's the pattern there. But the key is the last stars to appear in the sky before daylight will look just exactly like that. So we have the same thing with our winter solstice. Notice they're a little different shape. And then the equinox, and for whatever reason, I could not get my red lines to go, so I kind of highlighted, but you can see the 4 dots there, the 4 stars. Again, they will be the last ones to appear or to stay before daylight. This is Paul Taylor, and I want to give him credit because he is the one that actually was inspired to understand what these were all about. And Paul is very much a scriptorian in the Book of Mormon. And even though he's not active in the church, he is very close to the Spirit. He has lived with Native Americans for 25 years. He knows their culture. He knows their stories. He knows their sign language. Who better for the Lord to show what is actually on these rocks down here? I will also tell you that his father was an archaeologist. He traveled all over the world with his father. And so he knows a lot about archaeology. The 5 panels or 6 panels that we share with people are these 6 panels right here. We have the bird shaman panel, the marker stone, the sheep panel, the bear shaman, the hero shaman, and the baby or child. And this shows you, this is the hill, and it gives you where those are. From this one, the farthest one away, to this one is about 50 yards. And I want you to get that. That's half the length of a football field. Get that in your mind, because what you're about to see happening happens simultaneously in that 50 yards. Here we have the bird shaman, the marker stone, the sheep panel, the bear shaman, the baby's over just over here, and the hero shaman is here. Notice these petroglyphs are not up on top. Even though there's a lot of petroglyphs on the surface up here, they're down in off of the side in this boulder field. Everything starts on the marker stone. You'll notice on the marker stone that they have pecked. This is a symbol for the summer solstice. This is the equinox, and this one and this one together are the winter solstice. Everything in this area has what we call an archaeoastronomy effect. Archaeoastronomy is simply when during the solstice and the equinox, there are lights and shadows that move across the rocks and point out different things. And so when Paul and his wife first started going up there and looking at these things, they were just like everyone else that goes up there saying, these are really neat. But Paul kept saying, there's something more to this. And so they went during the summer solstice and began to see shadows and lights. And that's when his real research began. The marker stone sits out on a huge boulder that is basically a pedestal rock. And it's about 30 feet in the air. Between the nearest rock this way and that pedestal rock is about 20 feet. We know that this was put there. It's not natural because the patina is on the bottom, and patina grows with sunlight. Notice the little pebbles underneath. Those pebbles were used kind of like we would use ball bearings. If you want to make sure that the lights and shadows line up just the way you want them to, you have to be able to manipulate that stone. So they would get a large number of men out around that and move it to where the light would hit exactly where they wanted it to. This is the bird shaman. The name bird shaman was given this panel by the locals because he has bird-like feet. And it's interesting that the native people they changed the character of the person to fit what was happening on that stone. So let's look at this stone and explain just a little bit some of the things that are on it. First, we have the bird-like feet, which has the ability to ascend and fly. We have a club foot or a deformed foot. We have a Kachina life belt. We have a small shaman. Now, if you look at this one, he's square. We know he has a definite name. This one is more round, just represents a group of people. We have a rattle, a time coil, a wing draped over the man. We have the head of a serpent, and then we have a constellation up at the top. Again, we look at this knowing that he has bird feet, birds fly, they ascend. Instead of calling this the bird shaman panel, Paul and I like to call it the Ascension panel, because we will watch through lights actually that Christ figure ascend after his death. This is the bird shaman panel. I'm losing my, and this is the marker stone. So it gives you some idea. There's a lot of dead space in between. I will tell you, we got a drone a couple of years ago and flew over it to try and figure out where this came from. And on the back side of this stone is where it was. But even with it jutting out, like I said, there's a 20-foot drop. So we still had to figure out how to get that stone from here over to there. I wouldn't like to have tried to figure it out. Wherever there's an archaeoastronomy effect, there has to be a place where light comes through. This is the area that light comes through on this. I don't know if you can see it very well, but there's a little mark. It comes down, makes a V, and comes across. This is graffiti. We try to ignore it. Wherever there's an archaeoastronomy effect, you'll have a marker. Back up in here, there is a figure of a little man, and up on top is a coil. Wherever there is lights and shadows coming through on a solstice, you will have those three symbols: a little man, coil, and a marker. That's one of our first clues as to looking at petroglyphs that have that ability. So let's look at the summer solstice. At exactly 8:31 on June the 20th, if you're on Land Hill, you'll see a little light of spot of light right here on the marker stone. And it will move over until it touches the top of the summer solstice. And that happens at 8:37. And exactly at the same time that touches that part of the marker stone, this spear of light appears in the Christ figure's right hand. It moves up and it will disappear in the small shaman's hand at exactly 8:45. And for 12 minutes, nothing happens on this stone. At 8:57, another light appears on the club foot. It moves across the body of the Christ figure and takes on this shape. To Native Americans, that shape is a spirit shape. You will see it on their artwork, in their pottery, and their rugs. So when you see that shape, they're depicting a spirit. So now we've got a spirit shape over the Christ figure. All right. That light continues to move across and disappears. When another light appears in the left hand, and it moves across and up until it comes to this position. We have the rattle, the time coil, and the head. And we have a complete lighted, flying, fiery serpent. That serpent moves up and disappears into the constellation at the top. To stand and watch that, it's pretty amazing. But what's really amazing is that while this is happening on the Ascension panel, there are two other panels that are going off at the same time. Remember, I told you that at 8:45, a light disappears in the small shaman's hand. That light appears right here on the hero shaman panel. You can see it right there, just starting. And that we'll go over before I show you the movement of that. We'll go through what's on the, so we have a large village. This village has fields and water running into it. We have a common man. We have a contained body of water, a small village, the creator figure. He has the proclamation symbol. We have a messenger. We actually have two messengers. We've got one here, one here. We have the hero shaman or the Christ figure. We have the Kachina life belt on him. We have the river shaman or the water shaman. We have a river, and remember that river is square. So we should be able to figure out the name of that river. We have people by the river. We have the statement that I mentioned earlier, come to the place of first water. And then we have this symbol right here, which is choice. So this is a story that we all know that we're going to talk about in just a minute. Notice that all of them look like they have ears. They didn't have this is the only panel where you will see this. Again, if I go put my hands cupped or folded up to my ears, I am saying I am listening. So everyone on this is listening. Notice also all of them have their hands out or arms out with their hands down. That is in the pay attention mode. I should have taken your advice, Oak, and got a glass of water.
If you need to, you're welcome to grab one.
Excuse me, just a second. This is a picture of Paul against that panel. And I show this because I want you to have some idea of how big that rock is. Paul is about 6'4" or 5", and he's a very large man. So you can see how big this stone is. You'll notice the little mark at the back. This is where the light comes through to hit that particular panel. Up on top of that, there is a coil, and on the side of the back of this, there's a little man as well. So again, it's pretty easy for us to interpret where that light is coming from. This is a shaman seat. It has been carved out, literally. And the shaman would sit here and then explain the information on the rock. We believe that this back panel had petroglyphs on it, but they have eroded or been chipped away, and so we don't get the full meaning of what is there. Remember on the other side, at exactly 8:31, a light appeared on the marker stone, and at exactly 8:31 on the shaman seat, this light appears right here. So we've got two lights going off, one on the shaman seat, one on the marker stone. If you're sitting in this shaman seat at 8:37, remember at 8:37, we have a light that comes, a spear of light that comes in the shaman's hand. At 8:37 here, you have that spear of light right in the center of your being. It touches the marker stone for the summer solstice, and we see, so all three places we're seeing light at exactly the same time. Now remember, these are 50 yards apart. So my first question was, how did they do that? How were they able to manipulate the rocks so that they could have it do what they wanted to 50 yards apart? So going back to the light transferring to this panel, that light comes over, it begins to grow and move up towards the messenger, and then it comes across the Christ figure until it takes on, again, the spirit shape. And that spirit shape on this panel is exactly at the same time that the spirit shape is on the bird panel over on the other side. So now let's look at our hero shaman panel and interpret it and see what it really means. Again, I've given you symbols, and that should help you in identifying. So we have the people came from Jerusalem to John by the river Jordan to be baptized. And Christ also came from Nazareth by the Sea of Galilee to be baptized of John. And the Father said, proclamation, "This is my beloved Son." And the Spirit descended on him in the form of a dove. So maybe this isn't come to the place of first water, but it's come to the place of first baptism. But we have a choice. So what was the power? What is this that Christ gave the people? It's his power. The power to do what? To baptize. And the minute that that power is given to the people, it goes from them to the baptismal panel. In 3rd Nephi, the Lord said, "And Nephi arose and went forth and bowed himself before the Lord and did kiss his feet. And the Lord commanded him that he should arise, and he arose and stood before him. And the Lord said unto him, I give unto you power that ye shall baptize this people when I am again ascended into heaven." He gives him his power. We then see a spirit shape come over his body, moves across, and becomes a flying serpent and ascends into heaven. How do you say that without words? I think they've done a very good job of doing that with their pictures and their symbols and the lights and shadows of the solstice. So here's our two spirit shapes exactly the same time. When Paul and his wife were doing this, he was standing at one panel and she was standing in another, and they were yelling back and forth at each other. And I said, "You guys, this doesn't work. How are we really going to know what's going on?" So we took 6 cameras and we put them on each panel. And at exactly 6:20 or 8:25 in the morning, we started every camera and filmed the panel all the way through the lights and shadows. And then we took those and put them up on a wall and were able to watch what was going on each one of those panels at the exact same time. That's when it became very clear to us what was taking place on these rocks. Again, verily I say unto you that this is my doctrine, and I bear record of it from the Father. And whoso believeth in me, believeth in the Father also. And unto him will the Father bear record of me, for he will visit him with fire and with the Holy Ghost. And thus will the Father bear record of me, and the Holy Ghost bear record unto him of the Father. And my screen is blocked, so you guys will have to read the rest of it.
And me.
We see the Father making that proclamation as to his Son. And we see the Holy Ghost bearing witness of that on these rocks. So you have multiple scriptures on the same rock, depending on what you're looking at. But pretty much you can sit up here and read 3rd Nephi on these rocks. So what about the fiery flying serpent? We know that in biblical times and throughout Scripture, flying serpents do not represent Satan, but represent Jesus Christ. Again, in 2nd Nephi, rejoice not, thou whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. And the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety, and I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. I'm just going to skip down to 32. What shall then answer the messenger of the nations, that the Lord hath founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall trust in it? When you see flying serpents, and you see them in every native culture, it is a reminder to them of the promise that the Lord made them, that he would one day found Zion. And it says what? We, the poor, can trust in that. We can trust the Lord that the day will come when he will return and found Zion here on this earth. This is the Bear Shaman panel. It is my favorite. It's the only panel that goes off all 4 seasons. The others go off at different times, but this one interacts all 4 seasons. So let's look at it. We have the summer solstice, the equinox, the winter solstice. We have a time coil, a hole in the universe. We have an open cave and a closed cave, sacrifice tree. We have a bare-toed shaman who has a club foot. He has water pouring in. I have people say, oh, I went up to this really cool petroglyph with this alien on it. And I said, yes, I know. But that's really not feelers and horns, that's water. And he has a death mask on. He has a Kachina life belt on, but that Kachina life belt is open now. This is the shaman seat just across from the bear shaman. It's really not much of a seat. You kind of lay in it more than you sit on it. So in the summer, the light starts right here and moves across. It comes over until it's pointing directly at the open cave. When it touches the open cave, we see that flying serpent ascending. When Christ was resurrected and came out of the tomb, what did he do? He ascended to the Father. Again, these are 50 yards apart, but what an amazing way to tell the story through these lights and shadows. The shadow moves up. It almost looks like a hand, this being the thumb and the fingers coming down this way. And that shadow moves up until we have a perfect shadow of a thunderbird. A thunderbird represents ascension, resurrection, amazing on our resurrection panel. What better way to depict Christ than with a death mask on, with the Kachina life belt on, open, which represents power over life and death. If it's open, he's then using it. And that as that shadow moves up, talking about ascension, he comes into full sunlight on the panel. This is the baby or the child shaman. It is about 10 feet away from the baptismal panel. And there are lights and shadows. In the summer, the light comes from the left side and conforms. He was carved. Everything that they put on there is carved to conform with the lights and shadows. And that shadow moves across his body. Again, this panel is by the baptismal panel. Why? And again, I say unto you, ye must repent and become as a little child, and be baptized in my name, or ye can in no wise receive these things. And again, I say unto you, ye must repent and be baptized in my name, and become as a little child, or ye can in no wise inherit the kingdom of God. They took what they knew, and they put it on rocks, and hoped that future generations would be smart enough to understand that they truly knew Jesus Christ and the importance of baptism so that they could return to him. In the winter, the light comes from the bottom and it moves up at the top, and I don't have a picture of it. I've got to find one or go take one next winter. But when the light gets all the way to the top, there is a complete halo at the top of this baby's head, which is absolutely beautiful. It's interesting that in the summer, we're looking at spears of light generally. In the winter and equinox, we're looking at shadows and light. Winter, more shadows than light. So again, we have our winter. These two shadows will move up. This one will hit that one, and this will hit there. And when they do, the lights and shadows will then begin on the sheep panel. Again, sheep have many different meanings, but large sheep, and especially large squared sheep, represent large groups of people. And here we have two large people. We have a small group of people that we don't know, but we should know who these two are. Let's look at the symbols. We talked about them earlier, but on the sheep panel, we have the symbol for balance, crossover, come together, and come to from two different directions. That makes sense when you understand who these two groups of people are, or three groups of people are. This is where the light hits to make the shadows on that rock. You can see those shadows coming down. At exactly 10:02 on the winter solstice, this shadow will be aligned with this sheep's head. Now notice that all the sheep, their heads are tilted just a little differently, and that's to meet the shadows as they come down. That shadow will move across the sheep, and things go from point to point until at 10:15, this sheep is now in the shadow, and the first sheep is in the light. That moves across, starts coming across the symbols, moving across the small sheep until the lights disappear. At the same time, there's an interaction on the bear shaman. That light for winter comes across. This is a perfect light symbol for the winter solstice, and it moves on up. And now we're looking, remember it's winter, we're looking at shadows. This shadow is making the same type of shadow as the sheep panel had on it. And that shadow moves across until our Christ figure is holding a cone of shadow in his hand. And notice they even made it look like he's pinching that. He's pinching that at exactly 10:02. At the same time that the shadow is aligned with the first sheep's head. When that shadow moves across, the light begins to move across and down the sheep as well. It comes across until he is now holding in his right or left hand the cone of shadow. At that time, we find the first sheep in the light and the second sheep right here. Well, if sheep represent groups of people and the bear shaman represents Jesus Christ, when Christ came and taught his gospel, who was the first group of people that were given the gospel of Jesus Christ? The house of Judah, correct? He told his apostles that they would take the gospel to the people of the earth after he was resurrected. But the first group of people were the tribe of Judah. So we then have, as long as he has not given them the gospel, they're in the dark. When he gives them the gospel, they then come into the light. That second group of people then, who might they be? Well, we know that he also appeared to people on this continent, the Nephites, and gave them his gospel, and they were of the tribe of Joseph. So we have the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Joseph, who now brings balance. They have crossed over. They have come together from two different directions, and they have joined together in the gospel. But we still have this little guy down here, and we don't know who he is. But remember, when Christ came to the people on this continent, he said to them, "And verily I say unto you that ye are they of whom I said, other sheep I have which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. But behold, ye have both heard my voice and seen me, and ye are my sheep, and ye are numbered among those whom the Father hath given me." So he declares to these people, they are the sheep. They are the people that the Father gave him. This little group, we also find out who they are in the scriptures. "And verily, verily, I say unto you that I have other sheep which are not of this land, neither of the land of Jerusalem, neither in any part of that land round about whither I have been to minister. For they of whom I speak are they who have not as yet heard my voice, neither have I at any time manifest myself unto them. But I have received a commandment of the Father, that I shall go unto them, and that they shall hear my voice, and shall be numbered among my sheep, that there may be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore I go." So again, we can read the scriptures on the rocks. These people knew Jesus Christ, and they wanted their posterity to know, and the only way they had of leaving that message was by putting them on the rocks. So going up there during any time of the week, you can see the petroglyphs. That's like reading a book. But if you go during the solstice and the equinox, that's like watching a movie to get the full effect and understand what the meaning is. So again, we have the equinox. The light hits the marker stone. It then goes to the bear shaman, which is the only panel that goes off in the equinox. And this is my favorite. The equinox is in March. We knew that there had to be an interaction, an archaeoastronomy effect on the equinox, but when we went, nothing happened. So we talked to some of our friends, native friends, and they said, well, find something that denotes dates or time or whatever. We found these 8 digits. So we went back and said, okay, we've got 8. We don't know what 8 means or what it represents, and they explained to us and said, so look for 8 days prior to or 8 days after and see what happens. So we went up 8 days before the spring equinox, and sure enough, there were lights and shadows. We did the same thing in the fall equinox and nothing happened. So we went 8 days after, and what we found is that 8 days before in the spring and 8 days after in the fall, we get lights and shadows. So Paul and I have named that the tribal equinox because it is different than ours. So we have a light that appears over on the left side of the bear shaman. That light comes right through the constellation for the equinox. It comes up and touches the sacrifice tree. And then it comes, my favorite shot is this one, where that light pierces the death mask, basically giving you the idea that it's breaking apart the death mask. We then see the Christ figure coming into the light. And we get to this point right here where we have a shadow in the middle of a time coil. Anytime you have a light or a shadow that pierces the center of a time coil, you need to look at what's happening because that's the most important thing that can be happening. And as you look at this panel, the most important thing that has ever happened on the earth is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that's what we're seeing happening as these lights and shadows separate. Continues to move up until again we have a perfect thunderbird, meaning representing ascension, and we have a pointer. The cave was closed, now the cave is open. Or maybe we should say the tomb was closed and now the tomb is open. And the Christ figure is completely in the light. So I want to just take the opportunity to bear my testimony to you that our Father in heaven and his Son Jesus Christ love all of us. And he's made sure that all of his children knew who he was. And the petroglyphs that we have found on Land Hill in St. George definitely testify of Jesus Christ and his love for his children, and giving them the gospel and making sure that they knew him. What an opportunity and a blessing it has been in my life to be able to share this with others. I will tell you this, there is much more on Land Hill that we could talk about, but it is a very sacred area, and it has been confirmed to me through the Spirit, as well as from 2 individuals, that this area was literally a temple site for these people. And we have found references from as far away as 100 miles south of here on petroglyphs indicating that twice a year those people were coming to Land Hill for ceremonies. We have found other petroglyphs over around Zion that indicate that they come to this area twice a year for ceremonies. So we are continually studying and learning. It's exciting. We have found, just in the last 2 years, we found a panel of petroglyphs down here that has the entire plan of salvation mapped out on it as well. and I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm going to have you stop sharing your screen for a minute so it goes back to us full screen. And then I don't know if others had difficulty hearing. I could hear you the whole time, but sometimes it would speed up and slow down your audio. And so I think by taking the picture off, maybe it'll be easier to chat and answer questions. So I have a couple of questions for you. And if anybody else does, just drop it in either the Q&A or the chat, and we'll ask Patricia these questions. But one of the things you had mentioned is there's like over 600 petroglyphs down there. Is that the individual images that there's 600 of, or like incorporated scenes like we just saw?
That's incorporated scenes. That's entire panels.
Wow.
So we're talking thousands of individual petroglyphs.
And over how large, like you showed the picture of Anasazi Ridge, how far out do those 600 panels go?
2.5 miles along the Santa Clara River.
Those are, I mean, you've showed me some of that stuff before, but it is so amazing to see, you know, and to just think about logistically, they've only got minutes to record or to sort of plan out, like, where's this going to go and how's it going to fire off here and there. And it's like, how many years did it take them to put this together and say, okay, we're going to tell this story here and over here, and we're going to tell this story, and how it's just mind-boggling.
It is. And the thing is, you have to remember, they had the same problem that we have. For 3 years, we tried to film winter solstice sites, and it was cloudy. If there's clouds, no sun, there's no lights and shadows. So they had the same problem. It wasn't always sunny when they wanted to, when it was solstice time or equinox time.
Yeah. Wow. How, of the 600 panels, how many have you personally been to? Have you seen all of them?
I've seen most of them. I'd like to get back because I know that there are also archaeoastronomy effects on most of those as well, and we'd like to take time to film those and study those. The problem is it's 4 times a year.
Right.
If we have good weather. And so we've been studying just Land Hill for the past 10 years. And my problem is people come, they call and say, "Oh, well, are you going on the equinox? Are you taking a group up on the solstice?" I'm going, "Well, I guess I can, but I really would like to get out there and research and spend more time looking at what else is out there."
Yeah. Have you or Paul put together sort of like a dictionary of the symbols and the meanings so that it's sort of cataloged, like somebody can look at, like, I don't know, of the 600 panels, how many stories have sort of been cataloged and recorded, if not perfectly matched up into scriptural stories like the ones you shared today that are kind of obvious or more obvious once you make that connection. We have our own codex that we use. We haven't published it. We have people that keep asking for it, and it's not that it's a secret. We just haven't had a lot of time to put it together. So we are working on one, though. Okay. Brad asked about the significance of the 8 days before or after the solstice. Was that just when the light hit the rock in the right way, or some other meaning?
We knew that there had to be an archaeoastronomy effect, and we weren't getting it on our equinox. So rather than sit up there for a week or 2 weeks and try to figure out when the lights and shadows came, we went to our native friends. And the number 8 has a great significance in the birthing process of women. It also means a time of new beginning. So apparently from the way that they put those things on the rock, the way that the sun came up, it had to be, like I said, it happened before our equinox. And so they put it there, and the 8 was, anytime you have a symbol, it's trying to tell you something. So you have to look at it in conjunction with what's around it. So when they said, give us something that has digits or dates or time, or the 8 was the only thing we came up with. So then we had to experiment with that to see where that would take us.
Okay. I don't see any other questions popping up, but how would people get more information? You said you've got a couple of websites. How can people access that and anything else?
They can always contact me at anasaziexperience@gmail.com. Our website is www.anasazi.com. And we're, like I said, it's a work in progress. We're still trying to add things. There were a lot of, there's actually a panel up there that has the Garden of Eden, and it shows Adam in the garden alone. It shows Adam and Eve being cast out. It shows their journey through mortality, which is something we really haven't talked about. But someone asked how you spell Anasazi. It's Anasazi. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I hit my mute button really quick. So your website is anasazi.com.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, Stan, the recording will be available as soon as it processes and I can encode it and upload it. So hopefully pretty quick. Anything else from anybody? If you have another question, drop it in really fast. Otherwise, Patricia, we just really appreciate your time today and putting that presentation together. That's super interesting. And I just am so fascinated by, it's just so mind-boggling to think that they took the time to put that together for their descendants. It's kind of like we read in the scriptures, their great desire was to record those things for their, future generations way down the line, that they would have access to those things. And it's just so cool that, it's still been preserved to our day.
Exactly.
To be able to see those.
Well, and they were packed in very deep, and it's not easy. If you want to take a piece of sandstone that has patina on it and try pecking on it, it takes a lot to get as deep as they are. So they meant them to last. The ones that in these panels were put there approximately 350 to 400 AD, giving you a time period. That's right at the end of the Book of Mormon time period.
Yeah.
And we know from Latter-day Prophets that Gadianton robbers were in this area. Well, if there were Gadianton robbers in this area, there were probably Nephites in this area as well. And we believe that valley was filled with Nephites.
So Michelle asks, where is the petroglyph with the plan of salvation? Is that right in that same area?
No, it is down on the Arizona Strip. And it's at an area called Little Black Mountain, which is just south of the new airport in St. George.
Okay.
And it's if anyone decides to go, you have to have four-wheel drive. The road is terrible.
Okay, Brian asks, did the Anasazis perform ceremonies 4 times a year and maybe temple rituals?
Absolutely. I will tell you this. I had a professor from BYU last winter, solstice, come. I had talked to him a couple of years earlier, and I mean, I'm just a self-taught individual. I've studied and I've been involved in this my whole life, and I don't have any big degrees to hang on the wall that says I'm smart and know anything. And so when I told this professor what was there, he kind of put me off, and I thought, it's okay. We don't ask anybody to believe us. The Book of Mormon says when you receive these things, if you want to know if it's true, ask. That's what we did. We tell people to do the same. But he decided maybe he ought to come and check it out. So he came during the winter solstice. And after a lot of the people had left the tour, he came up to me and he said, so let me walk through this with you. And he walked through the boulder field, and he pointed out some symbols, and he said, do you know what these are? And I said, no, I don't. And he said, I have seen this symbol. He said, it's here 3 times that I've seen it. And he said, I have seen this symbol in every ancient and modern temple that I have been in my life. So what does that tell you? The Spirit told me 5 years ago that that was a temple site. I know that it is. I know that the people were coming there for the same reason that we go to the temple. We have found in the last 2 years, we actually have found a sealing room. I have tried to video that sealing room. None of them turn out. So obviously the Lord does not want that put out there, but it's there. And if you choose to come down at the right time, you can actually stand and watch it. It is amazing because those shadows literally show a man and a woman kneeling in an altar. It's pretty phenomenal.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it is a very sacred area.
Can you say what the other symbol is that was on those rocks that the professor saw?
The symbol is 3 complete circles. We have a larger one representing the celestial, one inside of that complete, the terrestrial, and one inside of that, the celestial, or the telestial. They are complete. There's a lot of coils and circles and things that have different meanings, but these are distinct symbols.
So 3 concentric circles going in. Got it. That is cool. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions pop up real quick, but you've shared your email address. If somebody has another question, they can get in touch with you. And just want to, again, thank you for your time and for following the Spirit all those years ago to get involved in this and be able to learn about these things and study them. That is so fascinating and cool. So thank you very much for being with us today.
And thank you for inviting me, Oak. I appreciate it.
Yep. Okay, everybody, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Patricia, and I will get this uploaded to the site as soon as possible. And then you can share it out. I think this is really, really fascinating stuff. So with that, we'll end the webinar. Thanks, everybody, for being here today.
Thank you.
See ya.